Well, thanks for tuning in. You're listening to Gnostic Studies, and this evening we'd like to do a lecture on psychology. We're going to start with the first class of the introductory series, Gnostic Psychology. And this page is linked in the description. This page is like the main page. It has the notes, the actual class that we're going to read, and then it has other things. This Century of the Self is an interesting video series about how psychology has been used to manipulate people for the last 100 years or more. Came out in the 1990s, but still very relevant today. So before we get into today's subject matter, we just want to give an introduction about Gnostic studies and what we're doing. We're trying to spread the message related with awakening consciousness, the importance of awakening consciousness, the psychological teachings related with self-awareness, self-consciousness, moving into the third state of consciousness. And so we're going to define all that. We don't want to be sort of, dropping hashtags and buzzwords and wishy-washy. We want to have definitions for those things so that we can know what it is that we're studying and that we're trying to achieve. And so that's part of this series. It's one thing to say that we need to know ourselves, and it's another thing to actually enter into that knowledge of self. So the purpose of Gnosis is for us to acquire knowledge of self, and we'll see that psychology, the Gnostic psychology's purpose is for us to transform ourselves. So all of this is possible, but first we have to study ourselves. We have to learn about ourselves, because without that information we wouldn't be able to know how to do the changes. So this first section, we're just going to give a general introduction about the times that we're in, so to speak, or the way that we see the world. And it seems like we take for granted the way we see the world. So let's step back and reflect on that for a little bit, because that'll allow us to possibly see other ways to look at the world. In 2012, a book came out called The Science Delusion by Rupert Sheldrake. And in that book, he emphasized that there were a number of dogmas that the modern scientific community held, which made them less than objective. And he ended up giving the name of scientific creed to those dogmas. And what's interesting about them is that they are in some way an expression of our culture and the general attitude of people in relation to nature and the universe. So in an attempt to summarize this, we can say that modern science considers nature and the universe to be purposeless and to a certain extent unconscious. But for the Gnostic, this is an aspect of modern science that we would like to address. In order to understand the Gnostic conception of the universe, we have to take into account that all things are interrelated and mutually interdependent, and the same is true for consciousness. There's an esoteric saying that the divine balance rules and necessitates eternal mathematics. This phrase emphasizes that the interrelation of different aspects of the universe is governed by mathematics, which is why the study of number and the Kabbalah become important as we continue these classes on esoteric subjects. But Gnosis takes the position that there is a balance that must always occur in the universe, and that if something is out of balance, it is quickly placed back into balance by certain forces. Very often in the physical world, these forces are seen as mechanical. But simply because we observe it this way doesn't prove whether or not they actually are guided by a higher intelligence or a kind of consciousness. For the Gnostic, the concept consciousness is very particular. To consider nature and the universe as purposeless and unconscious is to miss something very important. This is because of what has been called the microcosm-macrocosm relationship that exists between the human being, nature, and the universe. This relationship emphasizes that the human being is a universe in miniature, and that by studying nature, the universe, and ourselves, we can learn some profound and transcendental truths. So to consider nature to be purposeless or unconscious implies the same about ourselves, which is why, as Gnostics, we disagree with that modern perspective of the universe. Gnosis takes another view, that the human being's life can have purpose and meaning. Purpose and meaning are realized through understanding the universe and our place in it, our role or position. Life can be mechanical and purposeless, or it can be brilliant and awe-inspiring. The choice is ours. The more we understand about the universe and nature, the more we will understand about ourselves. Certainly there's mechanical laws that govern our existence, but there's also a consciousness that connects everything together. Modern science typically does not focus on consciousness, nor its effects on nature and the universe. But for the Gnostic, this is something very critical. In 1999, Masaru Emoto published a book called Messages from Water. If you've seen that movie, What the Bleep Do We Know? It talked about it. In this book, he documented experiments about the effect of human consciousness on the crystallization of water. He would put different words on vessels of water, or play music for them, and then freeze them and look at the water crystals. Sometimes he would even do blessings or curses. He would ask various people to do that to see what it did to the water. He would freeze it and then look at the type of crystals that were produced. Many modern scientists disagree that Mr. Emoto's findings are scientific. But what his work implies is that words, ideas, or concepts, sounds, and essentially states of consciousness affect the shape of the water crystals in different ways. And this brings us to psychology. The way we think and feel affects the way we act, and this shapes the world around us. So our thinking, feeling, and acting have an effect on the crystallization of the outside world. Gnosis claims that each person should have a vast and lucid spirit, and that spirit should try to establish a new rational scientific order in the general customs of living, which will be inspired by the immutable laws of nature. For the Gnostic, the universe is understood as a series of interrelated and interpenetrating worlds, which work together to form a cohesive whole. This can be represented with a diagram of different musical notes, from the positive absolute, or everything, to the negative absolute, or nothing. And this diagram is called the cosmic octave. We begin with the universe as a whole. Then, from the universe are derived the galaxies, including our Milky Way. Within these, in turn, are the solar system, the suns and associated solar systems, the planetary worlds. From the planets, we go further into the interior of the atmosphere of the planet and the interior of the planet itself, where we find the atoms, subatomic worlds, etc. We just finished a series called Gnostic Chemistry and Cosmology, where we went through this diagram and went into detail on it. But we bring it up so that we can understand our position in the universe according to Gnostic philosophy, because that plays a role in understanding our psychology. Clearly, if we understand our position on the earth, we're not the center of the universe. So we need to recognize our position, because that will assist us if we want to change our position. We might have a map, but if we don't know where we are on the map, then what good is that map going to be for assisting us to going to another place? And especially if we have a specific place we want to go. So in this diagram, the world above affects the world below. And to a lesser extent, the world below also affects the world above. Understanding the interrelationship between worlds allows us to grasp a great mystery. Each of these countless cosmic rays is considered not only as a path of energy transformation, but also as a line of growth. That is a possibility. Just as the energy descends, we can see the specific line that's descending here can also be an ascending line, or what's called the ray of creation in ascent. In the class we mentioned, Gnostic Chemistry and Cosmology, which we could also call Introduction to Gnostic Kabbalah, we study these things in more detail. But for now, we just want to go over the basic idea, because it helps us to grasp the concept of interrelationship between notes in the cosmic octave. Just as the structure of the ice crystals was affected by words or ideas in Mr. Emoto's experiments, so too is our world affected by us, and does affect our world. Therefore, in understanding all of this, it becomes very important to study our inner world, our inner states, and how they're affecting our external world or external events. And Gnosis gives us wonderful methods to do this. But first, we need to understand some of the fundamentals. What is Gnosis? We've mentioned already, Gnosis is about acquiring self-knowledge. So here's a definition from a book called The Awakening of Man. Gnosis is a cosmic teaching that aims or seeks to restore within each one of us the capacity to live consciously and intelligently. The word Gnosis means knowledge, wisdom, and is usually interpreted as an absolute and liberating knowledge. Gnosis is a true school of initiation into life itself that pursues a transformation of the human being and claims that each person must change their basic principles and customs in order to become a real or true human being. Gnosis has a mystical philosophy as its lifestyle, and is based upon a rational and scientific conception of the universe. In ancient times it was said, "Man, know yourself, and you will know the universe." And this is the synthesis of all transcendental wisdom. The transcendental science of Gnosis has this ancient motto as its fundamental cornerstone: know yourself. This principle demands that a person who wants to know themselves should understand what this knowledge of self means, with what it is connected, and what it necessarily depends upon. The human being in their present state is very far from self-knowledge, and therefore our first aim cannot be defined as self-knowledge. Instead, it should be defined as self-study. It is very significant when the human being understands that they must study themselves. It must be the human being's aim to study themselves, to know themselves in the right way. Self-study is the work or the way which leads to self-knowledge. But in order to study oneself, one must first learn how to study, where to begin, and what methods to use. This is because it is only with this self-knowledge that the human being can transform themselves. This knowledge of self is acquired through what we call Gnostic psychology. Before we go too deep into Gnostic psychology, let's look at what psychology is. The term psychology. It comes from two Greek words. Psyche, probably pronouncing that wrong, meaning breath, spirit, or soul, and logia, meaning study of or research. So psychology literally means the study of the soul. In the ancient mysteries, psychology was that part of philosophy which dealt with the faculties of the soul and its operations. Therefore, we could also say that it is the science of the soul. The study or science of the soul is the first step of that immense ladder which we must necessarily climb in order to comprehend truth. And in order to arrive at the truth, it is necessary from the beginning for the human being to be free from scientific and religious prejudices. I think we all already understand the need to be free from religious prejudices because of the times that we live in. But the reason we went through the whole beginning part about the scientific creed that Rupert Sheldrake mentioned in his book is because we oftentimes accept science the same way people used to accept religious ideas in the past. We're not saying to reject science or religion. What we're trying to emphasize is the need to not just accept or reject anything, but to be balanced. Because that's the real way that we learn. Not by accepting, not by rejecting. Science and religion are two fields of study which often appear to be opposed, but in reality, they're intimately related. Even as far back as 1861, Alphonse Lévy talked about these subjects. He said, "Now more than ever do science and religion, as well as authority and liberty, seem to deliver themselves over to a bitter war and swear an irreconcilable hatred for each other. Nonetheless, don't believe in this war. They are on the verge of uniting themselves and of embracing each other forever. The discovery of the great secrets of religion and of the science of the Magi will annihilate fanaticism by giving the reason for miracles and by revealing the unity of the universal doctrine. The truth is higher than all opinions and all parties, he says. The truth is like the sun. Blind is he who doesn't see it. Both science and religion are seeking the same thing. They want to understand the truth. Science is seeking for the truth in the material realm, at least our modern science is, and religion is seeking for the truth in the spiritual realm. Psychology is sometimes called a new science, but this is not true. Psychology is perhaps the oldest science there is and has its origins in the ancient schools of mysteries. Unfortunately, so-called modern psychology has lost contact with its true origin. And because of this, it is almost impossible to accurately define the term psychology or to know its fundamental subjects. In order to understand how psychology can be defined, it is necessary to realize that psychology has never existed under its own name, except in modern times. For thousands of years, psychology existed throughout the world under the name of philosophy. Parallel with its existence under the name of philosophy, psychology existed even longer, connected with one or another religion. There is no doubt that every known legitimate religion developed one or another kind of psychological teaching, often connected with a certain practice, so that the study of religion included in itself the study of psychology. This can be found if we do a comparative study of religions. If we analyze orthodox religious writings from different countries and time periods, then we will find in them pure psychological science. Psychology has also existed in the form of art, poetry, drama, sculpture, dancing, even architecture, or means for transmitting psychological knowledge. For instance, the Gothic cathedrals were, in their chief meaning, works on psychology. In the ancient times, psychology existed in the form of mysteries. In the ancient mystery schools of Greece, Egypt, Rome, India, Persia, China, Mexico, Peru, Assyria, Chaldea, etc., psychology has always been related to philosophy, to real objective art, to science, and to religion. In those times, psychology was intelligently hidden behind the graceful forms of sacred dancers, or behind the enigma of strange hieroglyphics, or beautiful sculptures, poetry, and drama, and even behind the wonderful music of those temples. Before science, philosophy, art, and religion parted to live independent lives, psychology reigned supreme in all ancient schools of mysteries. Later, after the disappearance of the mysteries, psychology existed in the form of symbolic teachings, which were sometimes connected with the religion of the period and other times not, but manifested in other forms such as astrology, alchemy, magic, and the more modern forms like masonry, occultism, and theosophy. Here it is necessary to note that all psychological systems and doctrines, those that existed or exist openly, and those that were hidden or disguised, can be divided into two chief categories. First, systems which study the human being as they find them, or as they suppose or imagine human beings to be. So-called modern psychology belongs to this category. And second, systems which study human beings not from the point of view of what they are or what they seem to be, but from the point of view of what they may become. That is, from the point of view of the human being's possible development. These second systems are, in reality, the original ones, the most ancient, and only they can explain the forgotten origin and meaning of psychology. When we understand the importance of the study of the human being from the point of view of the human being's possible development, then we'll understand that psychology is the study of principles, laws, and facts intimately related to the radical and definitive transformation of the individual. This is the type of psychology that we're going to be studying in this series. This is the type of psychology that Gnosis wants to emphasize and wants to bring about or encourage in the world. Real psychology. That is, real in the sense of the possibility of personal, individual transformation. So, that was the introduction. Now we're going to start studying the subject matter proper. Our first subject, the two worlds, the internal and the external. The Gnostic psychology is about studying the internal world, our interior world. We need to make a differentiation between the external world and the internal world. Gnostic psychology is based on the fact that we can only guarantee one thing, that we can affect ourselves. We may or may not be able to affect others, but we are certainly in a position to greatly affect ourselves and therefore our own personal world. The human being's world must be understood because as we see ourselves normally, we forget one very important aspect of our lives, our internal world. We find ourselves then before two worlds, the internal and the external. The external is perceived by the senses of external perception. Right? We know what those are. The eyes, the ears, the nose. The internal can only be perceived through the sense of internal self-observation. Thoughts, ideas, emotions, longings, hopes, disappointments, etc. are internal, invisible to the ordinary, common, and current senses. Yet, they are more real to us than the dining room table or the living room couch. Indeed, we live in our internal world more than in our external world. And this is very obvious. In our internal worlds, in our secret world, we love, desire, suspect, bless, curse, yearn, suffer, enjoy, we're disappointed, or we're rewarded, etc. Unquestionably, the two worlds, the internal and the external, are experimentally verifiable. The external world is the observable. The internal world is the self-observable, in itself and within itself, here and now. Whosoever truly wants to know the inner workings of the planet Earth, or of the solar system, or the galaxy in which we live, must previously know their own intimate world, their individual internal life, their own internal worlds. Man, know yourself, and you will know the universe. The more we explore this internal world called myself, the more we will comprehend that we simultaneously live in two worlds, in two realities, in two confines, the external and the internal. That's from chapter 20 of Treatise of Revolutionary Psychology. So, based on that, we can say that Gnostic psychology and knowledge of self is a study of the interior world of each and every one of us. So we'll talk more about it, but we're presenting the sort of fundamentals. The reason that we're explaining all of this is so that we can understand the purpose of Gnostic psychology and the present state in which humanity finds itself. Due to our present state of consciousness, we're not aware of very much. As we mentioned in the Dream Yoga and the Astral World course from chapter 37 of Fundamental Education, consciousness is a very particular kind of apprehension of interior knowledge, which is totally independent of all mental activity. The faculty of the consciousness allows us to know ourselves. So when we say that consciousness is independent of mental activity, then that means consciousness is not thinking. So we're talking about something which is beyond thinking. And it's very difficult for people at the beginning to understand this because it's something that we need to experience. And we can have that experience, which is the experience of just being calm, still, quiet, and no thoughts. Sometimes we go into nature and we have that. Sometimes it's after exercising we can have that. But it's a state that we need to discover in ourselves, and we need to work to develop it. Because it's the faculty that allows us to know ourselves. Because we receive information without thinking through consciousness. We understand things without thinking with the consciousness. It's beyond thinking. It's experiencing. So let's understand the different states of consciousness, because this plays into our understanding of consciousness. Consciousness can be in different states. There are 4 states of consciousness possible for the human being. The first and lowest state is sleep. In other words, a passive state in which the human being spends a third and very often a half of their life. And the second is the state in which the human being spends the other part of their lives. When they walk the streets, write books, talk on lofty subjects, take part in politics, and even kill one another. This state is regarded as active and often called clear consciousness or waking consciousness. The term clear consciousness or waking state of consciousness seems to have been given in jest, especially when you realize the state in which the human being lives and acts. The third state of consciousness is self-remembering or self-consciousness, or consciousness of one's being. It is normal or usual to consider that we already have this state of consciousness, or that we can have it if we want it. The third state of consciousness is the natural right of the human being. And if the human being does not possess it, it is only because of the wrong conditions of their life. The fourth state of consciousness is called objective state of consciousness, or objective consciousness. In this state, a human being can see all things as they are. It can be said, without exaggeration, that at the present time, the third state of consciousness only occurs in the form of very rare flashes, and that it may be made more or less permanent in us only by means of special training. For most people, even for educated and, quote, thinking people, the chief obstacle to acquiring self-consciousness consists in the fact that they think they already possess it. That is, that they possess self-consciousness and everything connected with it. The fourth state of consciousness in the human being means an altogether different state of being. It is the result of inner growth and of long and difficult work upon oneself. It is only by understanding these four states of consciousness that we can start to understand the purpose of Gnostic psychology. So again, the first two states are effectively the same because we're either dreaming, we're asleep or dreaming in the first state, and in the second, we're physically awake, but we're effectively daydreaming. We're not really conscious, we're not really aware, we're not really present. And so as we start to become more and more present, we're moving into this third state of consciousness. Now, of course, we can lose it again if we get identified with a text or with a video or a person that walks by or something like that. But this third state of consciousness is the first thing that we want to try and develop and observe in ourselves, is where is my state of consciousness? Am I identified with my internal world, or do I see it the same way I see the external world? There's something going on, maybe I have a feeling or I have a thought, but I don't take it as myself because I'm able to remember myself. So present humanity, as it mentioned in the quote above, spends the majority of their time in the first two states of consciousness. And this clearly affects us both when we're physically asleep and when we're supposedly awake. The human being is a trio of body, soul, and spirit. And the soul is the mediator between the spirit and the body. The spirit is the inner self, the inner being, the intimate one, the most high in us. Between the terrestrial human being and the inner self is the soul. The soul has a suprasensible and material body with which it travels through space, which is called the astral body. Therefore, the astral body has something human and something divine. The astral body has its supraphysiology and its suprapathology that are intimately related with the grand sympathetic nervous system and with our glands of internal secretion, where our hormones come from. The astral body is endowed with marvelous senses with which we can investigate the great mysteries of life and death. And these faculties or senses are sometimes called superior faculties or higher senses. we are souls that have bodies. The body is nothing but the garment of the soul. The body does not think nor love. What thinks and loves is the soul. The body is only the vestment or garment of the soul. During the hours of sleep, the soul comes out of the body and visits all those places that are familiar to it. During the hours of sleep, the soul wanders about the sacred mount, which we're told of by the saints of the Gospels. The Christian Bible, New Testament, book of Luke, chapter 9, verses 28 through 37 talks about this. This mountain that the Gospels speak of is space. During the hours of sleep, all souls wander about on the mount and visit different places. They go wherever their heart takes them. In dreams, our souls speak with distant beings. They speak with other souls, and they can even converse with angels. When it is said that Christ, Peter, John, and James climbed the mountain to pray, and that Christ was transfigured in their presence, we have to understand that their bodies of flesh and bone slept, while their souls were praying outside of the body, on the mount. Every human being can visit the mount at will. The important thing is to comprehend that we are souls that have bodies, and that we are able to enter and leave the body at will. Right? We talked about this in the Dream Yoga and Astral World class. The word astral means pertaining to or proceeding from the stars, stellar or star-shaped. Astral world that our astral body belongs to corresponds to our solar system. And with this body we can investigate in many things and learn about the universe. But our problem is that when we go to sleep, we dream. We do not realize where we are or the opportunity that we have. Our consciousness is asleep. It is not dangerous to come out in the astral body because the entire world comes out in the astral body during sleep. Every night. The one who wants to awaken consciousness during sleep should know the clue of discernment. During sleep, every human being wanders in the internal worlds with their consciousness asleep. The soul, enveloped in its astral body, abandons the physical body. This is how the etheric or vital body can repair the dense physical body. When the soul re-enters the body, then we wake up from our natural sleep. In the internal worlds, the souls occupy themselves in the same daily chores. They then buy and sell as in the physical world. The souls of the living and the dead live together during sleep. In the internal worlds, we see everything as in the physical world. The same sun, the same clouds, the same houses of the city, everything is the same. Our Gnostic disciples will now understand why the dead do not accept that they are dead. By coming out in the astral body, we can get to know the mysteries of life and death. Every human being comes out in the astral body during sleep. By awakening consciousness during normal sleep, we can know the great mysteries of life and death in order to awaken consciousness during sleep. There is a special clue to do this that we call the clue of discernment. If you're going down a street and you meet a friend, or you see an object that attracts your attention, stop yourself, pull your finger, or take a small jump with the intention of floating. Because the astral world is very similar, but it doesn't have gravity in the same way. So we can float in the astral world, which is why some people like to have lucid dreams and fly in their dreams. So, if we try and float, or if we pull our finger can stretch, or you can also push on something very hard, like a wall, and if it bends, then obviously it's because the matter is less dense there in the astral world. And so that's how you can recognize whether or not you are in your physical body or outside of it. If you float, or if the wall bends or your finger stretches, then obviously you're outside the physical body. And if you do not, then you're still in the physical body. In the internal worlds, we act in the same manner as in the flesh and blood. And if to that we add that there we see everything in the same manner as here in the physical world, then we understand that it is only if we succeed in floating or flying that we will awaken our consciousness and realize that we're in the astral body. The exercise is practiced at every instant during the vigil state, in the second state of consciousness when we're physically awake, with the goal of becoming more aware, asking ourselves the question, am I in the astral? Or am I in the physical world? And then checking. If we do this exercise during sleep, the result will be that we will remain floating in the astral body when we jump. Our consciousness will then awaken, and full of happiness, we will say, I am in the astral body. In this manner, we will be able to travel in the astral body throughout the infinite. We do not need to destroy the mind with so many books and theories. In the internal worlds, we can receive the teachings of the masters. Upon awaking from natural sleep, disciples should make the effort to remember everything that they saw and heard during sleep. We talked about the mantra Raum Gaum. If you pronounce that, Raum Gaum, mentally while you're waking up, that will assist you to bring back the memories of the dreams or the astral experiences. It is necessary for our disciples to learn how to interpret their inner experiences. By studying the book of Daniel in the Bible, they will be able to learn how to interpret their inner experiences. Sleep and memory are powers which permit us to know the great mysteries of life and death. Dreams are astral experiences. Dreams are real. As we have said, when the body sleeps, the soul wanders about. And this is what the Gospels call the sacred mount, space, or what we refer to as the astral world. During the hours of sleep, the soul occupies itself with the same activities, professions, and occupations of the day. While outside of the body, merchants buy and sell in their shops without realizing that they're dreaming, that they're in the astral world. During the hours of sleep, we see the souls of dressmakers, mechanics, shopkeepers, peddlers, etc., dedicated to the same work and daily jobs. Thus, during sleep, we see the carpenter in their carpentry shop, the policeman guarding the streets, the barber in their barber shop, the blacksmith at his forge, the drunkard in the tavern or bar, the prostitute in the house of pleasures, etc. Those souls function asleep, convinced and certain that they are in their bodies of flesh and bone. When someone tells them that they are outside of the body, they do not believe it, and they mock the person who tells them. But if those souls were to realize that they were outside of the body, then they would be able to transport themselves to any corner of the world in a few instants. All these people live in the internal worlds as if they were in the physical world. During sleep, it does not occur to any living being to ask whether or not they're in the physical or in the astral. Those who have asked such a question during sleep have awoken in the internal worlds. Then, with amazement, they have been able to study all the marvels of the superior worlds. Only by becoming accustomed to asking ourselves this question from moment to moment during the so-called vigil state can we manage to ask such a question of ourselves in the superior worlds during the hours given over to sleep. Clearly, while we are asleep, we repeat everything that we do during the day. If during the day we accustom ourselves to asking the question, am I in the astral or am I in the physical? Then this, during nocturnal sleep, while outside of the body, we will repeat the same question to ourselves, and the result will be the awakening of the consciousness. So when we're in the second state of consciousness, although we're not physically dreaming, very often we are dreaming psychologically, right? They're telling us we need to be concerned about this on the news or that, and it's always something. This psychological dreaming we call fascination, and it corresponds to the sleeping consciousness. The profound sleep in which humanity lives is caused by fascination. People are fascinated by everything in life. People forget themselves because they're fascinated. The drunkard in the bar is fascinated by alcohol, the place, the pleasures, their friends, and those they find sexually attractive. The vain person in front of a mirror is fascinated by their appearance. The rich, greedy person is fascinated by money and possessions. The honest worker in the factory is fascinated by hard work. The father of the family is fascinated by his children. All human beings are fascinated and sleep profoundly. Poor people, walking asleep like sleepwalkers. They walk sleeping, endangering their own lives. Any clairvoyant can see their dreams. People dream about everything that keeps them fascinated. It is necessary to know that humanity lives with its consciousness asleep. People work sleeping. People walk through the streets sleeping. People live and die sleeping. When we come to the conclusion that the entire world lives sleeping, then we comprehend the need to awaken. Which means moving into the third state of consciousness, self-remembering, or remembering oneself. The human being who is fascinated does not remember themselves. We must self-remember ourselves from instant to instant. We need to self-remember in the presence of every representation that could fascinate us. Let us pause before every representation and ask ourselves, where am I? Am I in the physical plane or am I in the astral plane? And then give a little jump with the intention of floating in the surrounding atmosphere. It is logical that if you float, it is because you are outside the physical body. The result will be the awakening of the consciousness. The objective of asking this question in each moment is so that it becomes engraved in the subconsciousness, so that it can manifest later on during the hours given over to physical sleep, when we're outside the physical body. Remember that in the astral, everything appears just as it is in the physical plane. During sleep and after death, people see everything there in a form so similar to the physical world. Because of this, they do not even suspect that they are outside the physical body. No dead person believes themselves to have died. They're fascinated and profoundly asleep. But if during life the dead person had made a practice of remembering themselves from moment to moment, if they had struggled against the fascination of the things of this world, then the result would have been the awakening of the consciousness, and then they would not dream. They would walk in the internal worlds with awakened consciousness. Whosoever awakens consciousness can study during the hours of sleep all the marvels of the superior worlds, living in the superior worlds as a totally awakened citizen of the cosmos. Whosoever awakens consciousness can no longer dream here in the physical plane, nor in the internal worlds. They stop dreaming. Whosoever awakens consciousness becomes a competent investigator of the superior worlds. In the superior worlds, the masters give to each one of us that which we need for our internal development. So this week, the homework, right, because we don't have enough to do, is something for the consciousness. To ask ourselves, am I in the astral or am I in the physical world? On the handout for today's class, which you can access by going to gnosticstudies.org/psych1, the all lowercase, PSYCH, and then the number 1, or by clicking on the link in the description. The handout for Notes 1 is what it's called for today, has some questions we can ask ourselves. But the main thing we want to do, the emphasis of this class, is to study our internal world and to ask ourselves, am I dreaming right now or am I in the physical world? Am I in the astral? And so we can do this and then look around, look at things, right? Because sometimes when we wake up from dreams, we say, well, that was weird. I can't believe I didn't realize I was in a dream. So we want to look at things. Look at the clock. Why do the numbers keep changing, or is it consistent with the way that clocks work in the physical world? Look at the sky. Try and be present. Be in the moment. Be aware. Activate your consciousness. So now we want to open it up for questions and comments. And if you have any, please leave some. Someone's already given a comment, which is, this is beyond insightful. Thank you. You're welcome. This is not my material personally. It comes from studying books of some of the authors that we mentioned in the description. They've been very, very helpful for myself as well, and that's why I've wanted to share them. So next week we're going to go into more detail about the two worlds, talk more about it, and the practice of self-observation, which is the primary method of self-study. We also want to invite you to join us for our meditation tomorrow night. We do meditation with a mantra. We just repeat a mantra. Usually it's just a vowel, like O or E or E. So we'll do that. And like I said, we invite you to join us for that if you're interested in that, or you want to try it out, see what kind of techniques Gnosis has. We'll do a little pranayama also, alternate nostril breathing. It's a very good way to transmute the creative energies. But we want to thank you guys for hanging in there and participating with us with your attention for this class. I know it's not always easy to do, and it's probably extra distracting being on Facebook because there's other things that we sometimes want to go and look at. So we appreciate you giving your attention to this, and look forward to speaking with you again soon.